All right, welcome everybody to the March 25th edition of Crop Hour. We are in regulatory week, and today we're going to be talking about industrial hemp with Brian Koontz from the Colorado Department of Ag. Before we get started with him, I just wanted to remind everybody that today is not the private applicator training. The private applicator training is tomorrow, March 26th, starting at 10 a.m. Central and will go until 1 p.m. So if you're waiting for the PAT, we're happy to have you on the call today, and I hope you stick with us for this talk about industrial hemp, but just know that it does not count for private applicator training credit. We will also throw some links into the chat for how you can request copies of our printed publications and also how you can view the playlist for the Crop Hour recordings that you may have missed earlier in the series. So I am going to turn it over to Brian. He's a hemp program manager with the Colorado Department of Ag, joining us obviously virtually. That's one of the beauties of Zoom. We don't have to travel for these meetings. So Brian, whenever you're ready, if you'd like to go ahead and share your screen, I'll pass the virtual microphone over to you.
Okay, am I up? Is my sound working? Is my screen up?
Yep, your screen's up.
Okay,
Sound is
awesome.
great.
Okay, great. And what do I have, about 45 minutes or so?
Yep.
Yeah.
And there will be time for questions. And if folks want to throw questions into the Q&A while Brian
Okay.
is talking, I will also kind of keep an eye on those for him as well. So feel free to throw things into the Q&A and we will get your questions answered to the best of our ability.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for inviting me, Amanda. Today I was planning on talking about, what we're doing in Colorado to adhere to the USDA final rule that actually became final just a couple days ago on the 22nd of March. I noticed that South Dakota already has an approved state plan, but it's a very new program. Our program started in 2013, right at the same time the hemp bill, 2014, right prior to the 2014 Farm Bill coming out. We still do have the ability to operate under the 2014 Farm Bill until January 1 of this coming year. That being said, we are still making steps to move towards some of the requirements of the USDA. Some of the sampling requirements and other things that I'll go over in this presentation that talks about how things were with the USDA, how things have recently changed with the USDA, and how that's affecting our state and likely affecting your state as well. Our program's grown quite a bit in the last few years. It's grown from just a couple folks to, a team of really 7 people now. Now we're going to get an additional enforcement specialist. The USDA, we're anticipating with the USDA requiring 100% sampling, that there'll be even more enforcement to do, because presumably there'll be more hemp that tests above the allowable limit, and there'll be more inspections, and there'll be more just violations in general. So we will be getting more help next year. But currently, aside from me, we have somebody that oversees registration and records. She has a couple administrative assistants that help her issue our registrations. They've been very busy. When the 2018 Farm Bill was signed in December of the same year, things just exploded in 2019, and our program went from like 1,000 registrants or cultivators to 2,800. It has come back this year. There has been a big adjustment with the overproduction that happened in 2019, but still things have exploded since the 2018 Farm Bill. And I know that's affected other states, including your own. We also have an inspection outreach coordinator that helps with a lot of our enforcement. I'm going to talk about our new third-party sampling program a little bit. States are required under the new rule or the final rule to do 100% sampling. And then, I mentioned the enforcement specialist. We also have folks higher up than me that help out the program, 20 field inspectors to help sample, and 3 chemists in our biochemistry lab dedicated for THC analysis. So anyway, the Colorado update in general is that, we're going to talk today about the state plan. You guys already have an approved plan. We're still working to get ours approved by the end of the year. The US and the USD final rule, what we're doing in rulemaking to comply with the USDA final rule, criminal background checks, which are a requirement of the federal rule, and then our hemp sample certification program, and a little bit about performance-based sampling, which is something that's very new that just came out in the final version of the rule. We're very thankful that some of the things in the rule changed after two public comment sessions with the USDA, and so there were some positive things that have come out of that. We did initially submit a plan in 2020. The USDA returned the plan to us, providing comment and asked for revisions. And so that's currently what we're doing. The USDA rule went into effect just a couple days ago, and the Farm Bill Authority for states like Colorado that already had a pilot program has been extended till January 1. And then, right now we are going through the final rule and considering all options prior to resubmitting our plan. Obviously, we want to get that submitted, presumably or preferably by the summer, so we can be ensured that we have an approved plan to begin January 2022 with. So there are some good things that came out of the final rule. We already had the authority to test 100% of the lots and had included that with our original plan. And that's what the USDA went with. We have always, ever since the beginning of our program, had a period of 30 days, a 30-day window in which the sample could be collected before harvest. The USDA had said in their interim final rule 15 days. They listened to us and other states, and they also extended that period to 30 days. I mean, 15 days to arrange for folks to go collect hemp samples in a state that's got thousands of hemp growers and varying terrain and a very large state. 15 days we did not feel was a reasonable window, and apparently USDA agreed with that. We did say in our state plan last year that no harvest would end prior to sampling. We did that in a recent rule change, or we're doing that in a recent rule change. And the USDA plan, of course, says that a grower cannot harvest until they have a regulatory sample taken. We'd always gone with the notion that negligence with the producer didn't happen after exceeded 1% THC. The USDA was saying in their interim final rule that it would be 0.5%, 0.5% would be negligence, and thankfully they decided to go up to 1%. So I think that was a huge win for the hemp industry, and for states, because this lower threshold of 0.5. That would just create, a twofold amount of regulatory work or enforcement work, and really punish farmers more than I think they really need to be. I think 1% is definitely a better playing field, and it's moving towards not destroying or as much hemp, or you being able to possibly utilize hemp in a different manner, other than just burning it or tilling it in. We had been last year collecting 12 inches of flower material and proposed that to the USDA. They came back with 5 to 8 inches of flower material, which isn't too bad. A lot of really the hemp industry has really been advocating that, for whole plant sampling, that, a lot of them, particularly the bigger operations, will harvest the whole plant. And they're not just cutting off 5 inches or the top 8 inches of the plant when they harvest it. So the argument is the whole crop should be tested, not just the top few inches. There is some good news in that I'll cover in a little bit. There is remediative sampling, which is covered in this slide. The Colorado plan, this is what we've done ever since 2014, is if there's a producer that produces hemp that exceeds the acceptable THC level, we will either have an inspector go out there and verify that it's been destroyed, or more commonly, will require video evidence or photographic evidence, and a written statement from the producer that they agree to dispose of their crop in a certain manner. The USDA, in their interim final rule, was saying that this had to be done by DEA, reverse distributors, or law enforcement. And of course, that wasn't going to be realistic in our state at all. When you have, over 100 folks annually that have to destroy something in different parts of the state, there was just no way that that law enforcement could be all those sites. So thankfully, USDA did remove that requirement, and they're allowing states like yours and ours to do their own monitoring of any necessary or required crop disposal or destruction. So we really advocated hard in our state plan that was not accepted last year. We advocated very hard for hemp remediation, a hemp remediation program. We advocated for post-harvest testing, and we advocated for THC remediation, chemical or mechanical extraction of THC to still make the crop commercially viable. The good news is the USDA said in their final rule that post-harvest testing is now allowed under 2 different conditions of remediated crop, and that's if the producer tests above the allowable limit with the top 5 inches, and they're able to remove the flower from the crop or blend the biomass and have that sampled post-harvest. So that's one of the things we're working on right now, is an alternative sampling plan for post-harvested material, or material where the flower has been removed from the field. They still are not allowing THC remediation, extraction, or chemical altering of the plant. But I mean, regardless of that, allowing any kind of remediation is kind of a win for us. We have advocated in our plan and in our current rules. We have different requirements for research and development. Research and development folks don't have the same disposal requirements. They don't fall under the same penalty matrix. All our research and development folks are institutions of higher learning, Colorado State University and University of Colorado and Adams State and several other schools, Fort Lewis College and Adams State, schools that have research plots. They're experimenting with maybe more unknown genetics, and they're not producing them for commercial use. So we've always felt that if they're producing plants that aren't going into the stream of commerce or for commercial use, they should be treated differently. The USDA final rule does not allow specifically for a different type of registration for research and development, unfortunately. They treat all registrations the same as far as having the same rules for the commercial cultivation of hemp domestically. However, one thing that's come out that's very favorable is they are allowing for states to um, either either stick to their standard sampling plan, which is getting a representative sample of so many cuttings on a field, depending on how large the field is, or also including performance-based sampling plans. And those are going to create more flexibility for research and development, um, certified seed and proven varieties, consistent compliance history, and immature plants. So what this means is if a state can or a tribe can demonstrate through, for example, through science that immature plants consistently produce low THC, or that certain producers over a extended period of time consistently produce compliant THC plants, or if certain varieties or certified seed is used that and consistently produces compliant plants, that that those don't have to be sampled as frequently or as often. Excuse me, and that and then therefore the sampling plans can focus more on unknown varieties or folks who are not consistently compliant. This is going to be a big challenge for states like ours that have such robust hemp programs to go from 100%, or excuse me, I should say, I think last year we got closer to 40% sampling, to go to 100% sampling. It's a big lift. Okay, so one of the concerns, or a couple of the concerns we have, and I kind of touched on them already, is the involvement of the DEA in the final rule. The DEA is requiring that any labs used for regulatory testing are registered with the DEA. This is a process that we've actually gone through in our state. We applied sometime last year and still haven't heard from the DEA yet. So they're not being particularly responsive right now, and B, a lot of labs are either unable to meet the certification, or like us have not been given a certification. We don't see the particularly need to do it. We think I think that we believe that states and tribes should retain the authority to certify labs and use and analyze our own hemp samples for regulatory purposes. The good news is that even though the final rule came out this week on Monday, I guess it was, that they've delayed the enforcement of this through next year. So that's going to give this year and next year. It's going to give states a chance to register, let the labs register the DEA, and of course that's going to be very helpful. A lot of states, I'm not quite sure where South Dakota's at right now, but in Colorado, we only have 2 labs that are registered with the DEA in the whole state. And so this is going to be we do appreciate at the very least the fact that the USDA has given states and tribes, essentially up to 2 more years to get compliant with that requirement. I did speak about the remediation of hemp. We are happy that producers can get their blended biomass retested or remove the flower from the crop and get it retested. There is a lot of great technology out there, infrared and chemically out there, that can remediate THC in the plant. And so we were hoping and still are hopeful that there'll be a more broader form of remediation allowed in the federal rule. I think I'd mention the where that's taken from the plant. Again, we feel that it's probably best for the industry based on, how growers actually harvest what plants that they use, that the parts of the whole plant are sampled and not just the main flowering stem. All right. So one other thing that really came up in uh, the a lot of the stakeholder engagement Colorado's done. I don't know that I have much in this presentation about the CHAMP, or the Colorado Hemp Management and Advancement Plan, but in 2019 we went under a very large stakeholder engagement, and we had 8 groups that started with seed and research and development and cultivation and transportation and testing and manufacturing and banking and insurance, really the whole supply chain of hemp. And over the course of 2019 and going into last year, we gathered input from these groups. It was over 200 people, and I think 8 agencies were involved in it, including law enforcement, and to really get some deliverables and produce a plan. It's called the CHAMP plan, and that should be out. It might be out this week, but I'm not holding my breath. It might be next week. But one of the deliverables from that was transportation. And in Colorado, I get a lot of calls from law enforcement, whether it be law enforcement with a vehicle pulled over on the road here, or law enforcement in Kansas, or law enforcement in Texas, or law enforcement in Utah, or another state that's got a truck coming from Colorado or going through Colorado that's got this, biomass, is transporting biomass. And, I thought it was kind of funny what one of our state troopers said. He said, if it looks like a duck and it smells like a duck, it's a duck. And it's very difficult, to discern the difference between hemp and marijuana. They're the same plant, same genus species. They simply have different traits as far as THC is concerned. One thing that law enforcement said in our state, after going through the stakeholder input, was that it was favorable for them to have a way to identify it, specifically having required documentation. There is no federally required documentation with the USDA. That's up for states or local governments to determine if there's going to be any kind of transportation manifest or documents required. And so we feel, and I know other states feel, that having a nationally viable transportation system would be the preferred method. We recommend that if a load of hemp is being transported, that it have the documentation for where it was grown, that it was a registered legal cultivation site, that it has a certificate of analysis with compliant THC results on it, that if it's being shipped to a different state that has certain phytosanitary requirements for insect and disease, that be included, and that something, a manifest or a shipping manifest that includes what it is on it and how much it is, be included. Law enforcement has told me that would be very helpful. And this also extends to, mailing it. I get calls from the airport about whether it can go on a plane, whether it can go on other types of commercial transportation. So, law enforcement said, having required documentation that they can at least go through a checklist and help determine what it is. And law enforcement also said they feel they need more education on it. One of the most common things I get with law enforcement is they'll call me or one of our people and go, well, I've got the shipment that I intercepted in the mail, or I've got the shipment I intercepted on the side of the road. They have this certificate of analysis, and it says it's point 0.01 delta 9. But they don't know how to read the other, the THCA on there. They don't know how to read THC analysis documents. And so there needs to be, what we've determined, more education, transportation. One thing that Colorado is working on, and we've gained input from other states on this, is what a national traceability system would look like. Preferably, this would be done on the federal level. Colorado is looking into seeing what we can do to get a traceability system going. It would be an electronics traceability system that would track the origin of the crop from the field all the way through the supply chain to the time it was tested, to the time it was extracted or manufactured or processed, and to the time it was sold. So anyway, that was kind of a long explanation of what transportation could look like, and we're very hopeful that something will come out of that as far as a national traceability system. I think the industry themselves want that to protect the industry. Another concern we had is the reporting requirements. The USDA rule does require producers to report certain things to either the USDA or the state that's regulating hemp. Basic things like we've already been requiring, the specific geospatial location and the size of the area and the people who are involved in the production of it and things like that. In addition to producers having to report specific information about their acreage to the state or tribe, they also have to report the same information to FSA. And that has created, at least in my experience, a little bit of confusion. I find the FSA coming to us asking for numbers and producers and acreage, and their numbers tend to be, well, at least in Colorado, a lot lower than ours, just because there is no requirement to report to them yet. It'll be interesting to see how that works when they do start reporting to FSA as soon as next year. So as far as rulemaking is concerned, we are going through that currently. In order to achieve 100% sampling in compliance with the federal regulations, we are actually doing 2 rulemaking sessions. The reason why we're having to do 2 is right now is our normal rulemaking session, where we have our rules submitted to our Ag Commission by April 1 and approved by July, the fiscal year. We wanted to get certain rules changed by July, specifically to implement our third-party sampler program and to corroborate with the Colorado Department of Public Health rules for approved labs. I'll go into the approved labs in a minute, but that's part of our plan, is to use our Department of Public Health and Environment to actually approve the state approved labs for us and do inspection of those labs and develop the requirements. So we had a public meeting yesterday with stakeholders in industry and went over our proposed rule changes. We had one the week before that was well attended with the public and our hemp advisory committee. I'm not quite sure what the South Dakota Department of Agriculture has, but we've had a advisory committee ever since our hemp act went into effect in 2014. There will be a second rulemaking session But that's going to be tough to promulgate rules for that until we get a state plan approved. So, as I said earlier, we'll be submitting a state plan this summer. Then we'll be able to engage in emergency rulemaking in the fall. And by December 30th, have additional rules to support our state plan and make us 100% aligned with the Colorado State Plan and the USDA requirements. And as I stated earlier, for any remaining states or tribes, that are still operating under the 2014 Farm Bill, January 1, 2022 is the deadline, and that's when the final rule must be complied with by everybody. Some of the recommended rule changes we have include making the registrant responsible for paying fees to approve samplers at third-party labs. So basically, what our plan is we did get legislative approval in last year's session to create a third party or a sampler certification program. This program is very similar to the concept of like a private applicator program where somebody can pay a nominal fee, and if they pass a test, a written or online test, and demonstrate knowledge of the correct sampling procedure, and also be willing to train additional or attend additional training, probably similar to the one you were talking about tomorrow with your private applicators, that they would be considered certified and authorized to collect samples as independent contractors around the state. So anyway, with these third party or independent certified samplers charging for their fees for sampling, and labs parting for their fees, of course, we're recommending that there be a rule requiring to protect, to protect the whole process, and requiring the registrants to pay for those fees. We do have to put in our rules, or are putting in our rules, some of the sampler certification requirements, that they pass, they take and they pass any required testing determined by the commissioner, that they understand the sample collection requirements, and that they agree to a conflict of interest agreement, or more specific in our rules, we have a rule saying that they can have their certification revoked or suspended if there is a conflict of interest. The reason for that is the USDA final rule specifically says no sampling agent or no sampler shall act as an agent or interest of the producer. The producer cannot be taking their own samples or having their own agents take samples. So there can be logically no conflict of interest. And recently, just in February, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment went through their rulemaking process for certified hemp, or for hemp testing laboratories. And that actually goes into effect on April 14th. The rule does. So beginning April 14th, labs will be able to get certified for hemp testing through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. At that point, we will have, or producers, I should say, will have choices on what labs to use. Up until today, all regulatory hemp has been tested at our own Department of Agriculture chemistry lab. We have not used any other labs. And this will certainly alleviate a lot of the pains and struggles of trying to get hemp samples from all over the state to Denver, basically. A few years ago, we used to use state employees to drive it all over the state in their own vehicles. Now that after the interstate movement of hemp has been allowed with the 2018 Farm Bill, hemp can be mailed and it can be in vehicles and cross state lines and things like that. So for the last couple of years, we've also been shipping it, through the United States Postal Service. That is legal and they will do it. Not to say there aren't problems with that. We've had to, it was very interesting working with them in our state that they ended up putting us on I think they call it a white list. So if there's a package and it appears to be some kind of cannabis product in it, smells like a duck, looks like a duck, all that they will go ahead, if it's going to our lab, our address, they'll go ahead and move it on through. That's not to say there's still local postal inspectors or postal employees that flag packages because of their odor, because I think as most people who have ever been around hemp know, it has a very pungent odor. So that's not to say that packages haven't been held by the post office, sent to the main postal annex in Denver, and then having them redeliver it or forward onto our lab because of our white list. And that, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it can take a very long time, more than just a couple days, to get a sample mailed or driven to a lab. And when a producer needs to have their test results back so they can sell their crop and enter into the stream of commerce, that's a problem. So having additional labs located in different parts of the state for sampling agents to take samples to will certainly improve the process. And that's basically kind of what our plan is for third-party sampling. And then there'll be additional rule changes to align with the USDA final rule later in the year. I wanted to talk a little bit about the criminal background checks. The USDA final rule states, I think this is verbatim here, that a person with a state or felony conviction related to a controlled substance may not participate in cultivating hemp for a period of 10 years from the date of the conviction. There is an exception to that, and that would be any person who is lawfully cultivating hemp under the 2018 Farm Bill. And I don't believe South Dakota had that. That's why they've got already an approved plan. I don't think this applies at all to South Dakota. But in Colorado, between the years of 2014 and 2018, when folks were cultivating hemp and registering with us, those folks would have an exemption. But the 2018 Farm Bill was signed on December 20th by Trump. And so anybody that's gotten a felony conviction since then would not be exempt. So another thing that's identified in the federal rule and that we put in our state legislation, our Hemp Act last year, was a definition for key participant. The USDA feels that anybody that's a key participant in the cultivation of hemp needs to have these federal background checks done on them. So we've defined what a key participant is, as the USDA has. It would be, it'd be anybody with a controlling interest or managerial control of a corporation or a proprietor or a direct partner. And it would not include non-executive managers such as farm, field, or shift managers or farm labor. So, in a lot of farms that at least register with us, there are a lot of sole proprietors. There's a lot of family operators that have more than one family member directly involved in the farm. And of course, there are controlling partners. So we are requiring, or we will be requiring next year when we have to by January 1st to have background checks implemented for all these key participants. How are we going to do that? Well, currently we're applying. We've already talked to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. That's the chief law enforcement body in our state, and they do background checks for other agencies and for other law enforcement. They have a couple third-party vendors that will actually do the fingerprinting. They either have places that in different parts of the state where folks can go visit them and get their fingerprints done in order to get the fingerprint based check done, or in some cases I think they travel. But anyway, in our state there's two agencies or two companies that work for that work with the CBI, Indigo and Colorado Fingerprinting, and then this would be the responsibility of the key participant in order to receive a registration. So we would basically have access to a system to verify that what they're telling us is true, that they are providing their record and it is them. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very new for us. I'm sure that South Dakota is going to have fun with this one too, but it is a requirement nationwide, so all states and tribes will need to be doing this. It doesn't seem like an unreasonable cost. I think the fee's only $20 per card, and the mandate would be that this be done every 3 years for key participants. It doesn't have to be done annually. All right. So as far as third-party sampling programs concerned, I kind of talked about it quite a bit already. The authority for us to do this came with when our hemp bill went into effect last year on September 14th. We did hire a third-party or a sampling certification coordinator beginning March 1st, and he is currently doing a lot of this right now, establishing what the requirements are to become an authorized sample, and what the process is for that, and what the training requirements are going to be, and that that they follow what's outlined in our state statute. The registered cannot again harvest if we're having samples collected. An authorized the sampler shall collect samples to a state certified hemp testing laboratory, which I just talked about. The training materials, it's going to be kind of a big process because obviously the plan is for producers to they'll be required to get their crops tested. So they're going to need to have a list of who is qualified to do it, who is certified, and they're also going to need to have a list of where or what labs can do that. So some labs have proposed that they're doing their own testing, that they'll have their own agents go out and collect the samples and bring them to the lab. I suspect some samplers, they'll model their business by collecting samples and working with specific labs and incorporating it in their own cost. So right now, Michael Roll, our coordinator, is working on how this process is actually going to play out. And then, of course, we're going to have to conduct quality control to ensure that sampling is done in a consistent and uniform manner. What this means is we'll use our own trained agents to, do, either, sample some of the similar lots to verify that there's not differences or inconsistencies in how it's being sampled by third-party samplers, and also to do on-site inspections of, the third-party samplers to, ensure, again, consistency, and they're doing it the correct way. Okay, so I think I mentioned that the testing laboratory rules are effective in April. This is, these rules are very specific and have they establish requirements for the labs, their personnel, requirements for the personnel, and their methodology and their process. And it's going to allow, we're hoping a dozen labs or more fairly quickly throughout the state to become certified to do this. There's a provisional certification without registration through next year, I think I talked about. So the labs will not be required to deal with DA registration until 2023. And as I also mentioned, all regulatory testing through today, even what we'll be doing this spring for indoor cultivation, is done exclusively by our own CDA laboratory. We see some of the processes unfolding this way. We believe that it's probably a good idea to have the samplers test or renew no less than annually. I know with other programs or by private applicators and other certifications that sometimes it's every 3 years, every 5 years. We know with our own staff that has been doing this for years, that refresher training annually is good. And of course, there has been a lot of rule changes and change in the industry in general. And we feel that, an annual period is probably the best. Obviously following state and federal guidelines, the sampler not having a conflict of interest, and that the agents will act as independent contractors billing producers directly, and that producers are required to pay all sampling and testing fees. We did have experience last year with utilizing several seasonal samplers in 2020. These were several people that I recruited directly through extension agents and some of our research facilities and industry, and it worked out very well. I mean, it's an incredible amount of work somebody has to engage in from August to September into October to do this kind of work. And these people were all trained virtually, basically, this way, the way we're talking right now, with talking and video chatting and going over materials and so on and so forth. So we do have experience in that. We will have the labs on board, and we are planning this fall moving towards closer to 100% sampling to utilize certified samplers this fall, in addition to our own staff, to ensure that we can be compliant by 2022. And we will be doing again quality control and putting in our plan that we will achieve the 100% sampling requirement by USDA by next year. I think I'm almost done here. This might even be one of the last slides. The USDA again stated that alternative sampling plans, or I guess more correctly, I should say, performance-based sampling plans, consider the following factors. And I kind of already mentioned these, if it's certified seed or proven varieties, if it's being done for research, if the producer has produced compliant hemp over an extended period of time, or other samplers or other factors similar to these, clones or immature plants that consistently produce low or no THC. And we are considering all of these options in our sampling plan prior to submitting our state plan this summer. And that's kind of what I have. I hope it was helpful. I know a lot of it was Colorado centric, but it really was based on what the federal rules are. We've talked to South Dakota and other state departments of agriculture. Our states probably worked more closely with states like Kentucky and Oregon and Montana, states that have, in Washington, states that have more established hemp programs over the last couple of years, and more producers. But I wish South Dakota the best of luck, and with this new program that they're undertaking. And I'm available for any questions. My email's up there. If you have questions now, I'd be glad to answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And yeah, I think this gives a, a nice overview of what we might expect to see coming out of, a state plan for South Dakota. And I know we've got a quick survey just to sort of, get some metrics. So that'll pop up on your screen. Feel free to answer those questions. When you do, you can hit submit and it will disappear. I also put the links in the chat again for the publication request form and the recording playlist on YouTube. But if you do have any questions for Brian, feel free to put those in the Q&A, and we've got a few minutes to go over those. I will also go ahead and share the QR code now for the certified crop advisors. So if you are a certified crop advisor, get your app out. And Brian, if you can go ahead and stop share, I will pull up my QR code.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've had some folks throw questions, mostly that we were just able to answer panelist-wise, into the chat. But yeah, anybody has questions for us or for Brian, feel free to put those in the Q&A or the chat. We will stick around for a little bit after the recording is stopped for some informal discussion. You're welcome to stick around and join us for that as well. And then just a reminder that tomorrow is the private applicator training. So if you're looking for that private applicator certification, make sure that you are online with us tomorrow at 10 a.m. And that is a 3-hour training. So we will be on a Zoom until 1 p.m. Central. So make sure you've got your water, your snacks, be ready to stick with us for the full 3 hours on Zoom tomorrow for the private applicator training. And yeah, I don't see any questions coming in. So Matt, if we want to switch over to ending the recording and doing sort of the informal discussion, we can go ahead and do that.